I have two jobs. I'm the executive director of the Moulton Community Youth Coalition, and we're going to talk about what that means. I have a second job where I teach at UVM through the Howard Center youth who experience autism ages 18 to 24. Those are my two jobs.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Kate is also involved in that coalition, is that right?
Yes, I'm the director of the Winooski Partnership for Prevention, which is another prevention coalition, and Tony and I are part of a larger network of coalitions. Sorry. Tony and I are part of a larger network of coalitions.
Yeah, there's a microphone. There's no microphone, but you can just project.
I'm getting over a cold, so.
Okay, and so as I mentioned, Tony and George and I met in PETS, and then we started bumping into other presidents and other people that were working on this opioid intervention, prevention kind of work, and then it turns out Tony does this in his day job, so he has an immense library of connections and resources and data and tools of people not only here but across the country, and Kate is one of those people, and we've had meetings with Kate. The presidents have met with Kate and her colleagues to find out what's going on already in communities and what do each community need and all of these various things. So they've been very generous with their time. And we've got this traveling road show here when the opioid presentation comes up, all of the other presidents go to that club that's having it, and today is our turn. So we're very grateful that you have made time to come and visit us, and I'll give you the floor. Thank you. And I'll be at the computer, so if you need your other things, let me know. Okay.
So I'm going to start. So my name is Kate Nugent, as I said before, and I'm the executive director of the Winooski Partnership for Prevention, which is a prevention coalition in Winooski. And I'm also glad to be here as a new member of the South Burlington Rotary Club. Rotary was a big presence in my life as a kid. I grew up on the Cape, and I just was aware of all the great things they were doing, so I've always been inspired by Rotary, and it's great to be part of it and also sharing some of the work that I do in my professional life as well. And I was thinking when George was talking about how the South Burlington Rotary especially has a youth interest, and also the way that Rotary is structured in this international way, but also goes local, that it's a lot like prevention work. I was thinking of like Tip O'Neill, who said all politics is prevention, or all politics is local, and I think it's similar to prevention. These issues are large and international, but they're also local, and that's kind of the key to solving them. So I just have some things to share with you about the work we do in Winooski as a kind of like way to see what it looks like. And then I think we can talk more about theory or whatever questions you have. So one of the things we do is provide information to parents, and recently put a post on Front Porch Forum about something you may have heard about by now called juuling. It's an electronic cigarette that looks like a jump drive. You wouldn't necessarily notice it, and it's kind of exploded in the preteen age group. So we thought, we have this information, we should put it out there in ways that we know our community is paying attention to, and in our community, Front Porch Forum is a big part of it. We put a notice on Front Porch Forum about what juuling is and why it's important to know about it, and then we got this response from a parent that just made it, I felt like this is so great that what we did made a difference for her. So she said that she never would have had a conversation with her daughter if she hadn't heard about this from us. And that's kind of exactly what we're hoping for with the work that we do. And in Winooski, we've spent the longest time focusing on tobacco issues, and we've focused mostly on middle school. So in the most recent youth risk behavior survey that monitors attitudes and beliefs and use rates among youth, most schools in Vermont take it. We noticed that there's been some positive trends in the groups that we work with in Winooski, which is, with a lot of data that's going the way we don't want to see, this is exciting. Similar with some of the things we look at middle school or high school. And then one thing that we're working on right now is alcohol and the way that kids understand it in Winooski. Winooski is unique in that it has 26 or 27 places that you can buy alcohol. There's one coffee shop. And while a lot of it has this sense of vibrancy in terms of the restaurants and the nightlife. Sometimes without doing anything to talk with kids, they get this impression that this is just what you do all the time. And so you can see from our focus group that that is exactly what their impression. And these are not so great numbers. You can see in terms of, we call these risk factors, so things that predict future use of youth. So perception of peer disapproval, whether or not they think their friends would disapprove, whether they think their parents would disapprove, and whether or not they perceive harm from binge drinking. And as you can see, it's kind of gone down. So only a little over 40% of kids in the high school think that they would harm themselves through binge drinking. So that's something we want to work on. Another thing that we do is gather and provide data that's very local to our community. So this is kind of what I was talking about before. All those pictures, they're kind of hard to see, but of the martini glasses, those are all the places you can buy alcohol. And then the dots are incidents related to alcohol. So it's like DUI, violence, anything that is related to alcohol. And you can see how the dots are kind of clustered around the retail locations. So once we have our local information, we can empower people to change things. These are 3 examples of what I would call success stories in our community. The one on the far left is a sign for tobacco-free parks. And so by helping the city and educating the community, we were able to support the city changing their parks to being smoke-free. And so that reduces the amount of time that kids see other people smoking, so they get this norming is really important. So if they get the impression not as many people are smoking, they're less likely to try it themselves because they think no, people aren't doing that. So that's important, and also reduces the secondhand smoke exposure, which you may probably already know, but that's basically as bad as smoking yourself. So that was a really exciting thing. The second thing was we worked with this local store owner, and he used to advertise the prices of cigarettes outside of his store. And we know that that mostly impacts youth. Adults are going to find it because they're addicted to it, but the pricing really impacts youth decisions to use. And so we had been talking to him and developing this relationship for a long time. And he just kind of voluntarily one day took them down. And so we wrote him a letter with our student that we work with saying, thank you for doing this. And then we asked him about it later, did you notice anything impact your sales or anything? He said actually he saw increase in sales, and he was glad to do that because he said kids have enough to deal with without having this issue. So that was really a great result. And then on the far right, you see pictures of kids. We work with Winooski Beverage Warehouse, which is one of the, I think, highest grossing alcohol outlets in the whole state. And they let us come in right before prom every year. I think they do this in Shelburne too, so you might have noticed it. And we put stickers on the packs of beer and things to remind people not to give their kids alcohol or not to buy for younger adults because of the both legal and other consequences. So those are 3 things that I'm really proud of us doing. And this is our group of kids that we work with in the after-school program. And we find that's a really great way to educate adults is when you empower kids and they can talk to adults about these things, because they're much more fun to listen to than we are.
Couple things. So I live in Shelburne with my husband. I'm 7th generation Vermonter. I'm very passionate about substance abuse prevention for many reasons. And the question that you just asked was about juuling. Kate described it as an electronic cigarette. It's a vaping tool. It doesn't really provide vapor. It's actually aerosol. It's an aerosolized nicotine liquid. So what it means is the tobacco and alcohol companies keep getting smarter and smarter about how to create new addicts. Kate, correct me if I get too passionate. But what does alcohol tobacco do? It kills people, right? Early. So they know they need new users. They need kids to become addicted, so they develop better, savvier devices and substances to get those into those kids and get them addicted. Now, juuling, as Kate said, it's like a flash drive, and I didn't really know a lot about it until November myself, and it didn't come out too long ago. Teachers didn't know what it was. Teachers thought it was, and parents, that it was just a flash drive plugged into the kids' computers. So it's camouflage. That's how I think about it. The companies are smart at camouflaging those tools. So there are these little pods, and if you ever had those air fresheners my mom has at her house that plug in, Glade plug-ins, right? It makes me think of that kind of thing, only much smaller, that plugs into the bottom of the flash drive and heats up the liquid and sticks that aerosol into kids' lungs. Now, cigarette smoking or electronic cigarette smoking, the tobacco stuff, the toxins and the addictions get into lungs part way. But with aerosol, it gets in a lot farther, which does more damage. And it's marketed as a quit tool. It is not a quit tool. I have 2 daughters. One is 18, and she came up to visit a few months ago. She gets off the airport and immediately starts juuling. I kind of lost my mind a little bit. Like, I'm working on this, and she's in a medical track, and she knows it, but it speaks to how well the companies market to kids. And Kate's talked a little bit about that, definitely. But they know how to do it. They spend, Kate knows this data better than I do, but millions of dollars on the marketing, and we have such a small budget to try to counter it. They do it through colors and flavors especially, and tactics. For example, when I used to walk up into a convenience store with my youngest daughter, and she was yay high, at the counter level, there were advertisings that were speaking not to my needs, but speaking to the kids who could see them. That's the kind of low-brow tactics that the companies market to get kids addicted. They start when they're really tiny and little and get them used to what those substances can do. So juuling, the reason it sucks, I'm going to just say that, but that's a pretty clean version of how I feel about it, is that it doesn't take very long for a kid to get addicted, because that little pod has the same amount of nicotine as a pack of cigarettes. So when a kid is inhaling that, just think about what that means. And I watched Cassidy, my oldest, go through this, and I watched her, and I try to think about my tactics, because my husband was like, "That sucks, what are you doing?" He went that, reactive way, and of course Cassidy was like, "I'm 18, screw off." But I was thinking about, okay, how do I approach this? This is the work I do, I gotta do this right. By the end of the week that she was here, I kind of got through to her, but what I want to impart to you is that I watched her, and every 20 minutes, as she would be sitting, that foot would start tapping, and she'd start biting her nails, because she was jonesing for that nicotine. And what we know in schools, we have the SRO, what does SRO stand for? School Resource Officer. Kate's like my Buddha. Like, what? I ask and it comes to my head. Ask Kate is like asking Google. He's so smart. Our SRO in Moulton, because even though I live in Shelburne, I work at the Milton-Colchester Coalition, as Kate is working the Winooski one. Your community, you have CY, Connecting Youth. You have a coalition here too. But the SRO said, and I heard this on NPR, and of course if it's on NPR, what is it? It's always, I always ask questions, but I heard it on NPR, which is that the kids, years ago when they were smoking cigarettes, some kids still do, but this Kate said that has dropped a lot. It used to be kind of a rebellious thing, like, oh, I'm going to smoke because I'm going to, show you one, and it would become an addiction. But with kids, it's so quick, and with juuling, and it is so addictive that they're juuling and they're getting in trouble, not just to say, look at me, I'm so cool. It's, I can't stop, I need to use this tool. I need to go to the restroom right away because I need to juul. I'm going to do it in the cafeteria. And they found out how to hide the aerosol. I was going to say vapor, but that's wrong. So, quick answer, that's what juuling is. Yes?
And where do they get this device?
Good question. So, just like people can get a hold of alcohol and tobacco before they're 21, sometimes people will buy it for them. Correct me if I'm off base. This is why I keep looking to my amazing Google person. But I have heard the stories of the cost of the device, the starter kit, I guess you want to call it, is about $49. And we bought one with grant funds to show, and I should have thought and brought it with me today because then I could have showed you. But we've got some other things we want to touch on quickly. But you can buy a Visa gift card for $50. You could go online and purchase this kit and have it sent. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there is a check. I know that there's been some work to try to change that. But that was one way. And I spoke at the one of the Rotary conferences, I'm trying to think when it was, back in October up at Linden State. It's Northern University, but it's always Linden State to me because I graduated from Linden State. And as I was talking about this, a mom said, oh my God, just today there was a package on my 13, 14-year-old son's bureau, and I'm nosy, and I opened it, and it was this thing. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a flash drive. I opened it up, and what is this J-U-U-L? Juuling, that's the company. So that's one way that they get it, and there's lots of other clever ways. Eric?
Could you also make the bridge here between the juuling and the opioids? Because I remember being blown away by you telling me how this is like
Eric is my plan.
Reprogramming kids before they're 18.
$1 for Eric. Yes, thank you. Absolutely. So I'm going to make the bridge. So there is somebody 2 years ago, I went to DC for a conference, And it was where lots of coalitions of people doing this work got together, and there was this amazing person, Brittany's, what's that?
I was there.
Oh yeah, that's right, you were, Brittany was there, thank you. I thought she was like mimicking me and we were gonna do a dance. Yeah, Brittany was there too, so correct me where I'm wrong and what you remember too, but Dr. Robert DuPont spoke to us. And he is the former director of NIDA, the National Institutes on Drug Abuse. It's a new name now that I can't remember, but he's still heavily involved. And he was the first director, I want to say. He's still heavily involved, but he was one of our keynote speakers, and he was charged with really giving us, like, what do we do about this? What's the connection that Eric just said? So he shared that if a kid uses alcohol, tobacco, or THC, marijuana, whatever we want to call it right now, before the age of 18, and Kate's going to talk a little bit more about brain development, because there's more statistics to that, but he was saying before the age of 18, we could radically reduce future potential addictions. Now, addiction to opioids, I'm not the expert on that, but we all know that if you get into an accident and you prescribe opioids, and we've heard the stories of someone becoming addicted. Last July, was it, they changed the rule where there's fewer pills that you can get if you're injured. I had kidney stones 2 years ago. I was given a bottle of 100 crazy pills, and I needed like 2. That rule helps change that. But back to Eric's point, what Robert DuPont in DC said, that when a kid uses any of those 3, marijuana, THC, tobacco, nicotine, juuling, or alcohol, and the amount and rates of use can vary on the person's metabolism. If a kid uses that before 18, their brain becomes, think of it as like fish hooks. Fish hooks hungry for a substance in the future. It rewires their brain to make them more likely to develop an addiction to those substances, but definitely other substances in the future. And he went on to say he's done a lot of work with folks who have been addicted to heroin, to fentanyl, things that you've heard about, opioids. And he said, none of those, at least according to him, correct me, Brittany and Kate, none of those people started by using heroin. It wasn't like, let's pick a drug and let's start with heroin. It was alcohol, tobacco, marijuana. And it was before the age of 18. Well, their brain is still busy cooking. So part of our charge is to try to help prevent youth from using that. And Kate spoke to a few of the ways that we try to do that. Is that a good answer, Eric?
Oh yeah, that'll do.
Okay. So with that, actually I want to ask a question, and as I'm asking it, if my friend George could begin to hand out a slide. So I just kind of gave the answer away, but what would you say, somebody raise their hand, what would you say, before we look at the sheet, what would you say is some of the drugs that, a drug or a drug that kids tend to use the most in schools? Any guesses? Just toss out some vitamins. No. Marijuana. Marijuana, yes.
The drug cabinet, parents' drug cabinet.
Yeah, at the parents' drug cabinet. I did this a little out of order, but that slide comes from what Kate referenced earlier, the YRBS Youth Risk Behavior Survey done every 2 years. And it is a self-assessment that youth anonymously report on the survey. And I feel like it was really helpful to get a sense of, when we talk about the opioid problem, it is a problem. But where we like to focus is look at those statistics. What are the drugs that kids used in the past 30 days in this one slide? Misuse of a prescription drug, 7 or 4%. Drank alcohol, 25-33%. Used marijuana, 20-21. Use of electronic vapor product. This was done just as juuling was starting, so we suspect that one will probably pop up a little bit. But I just wanted to give you perspective. And when it comes to prevention, it's about empowering kids and adults and communities with the knowledge that we're giving to you right now with all this information. And what are the strategies to change that? Kate has been really good at doing that in Winooski. Marketing, I just shared with you, holding Autumn, my youngest, hand, while I couldn't even see the advertising. She was being pumped with it. I challenge you, when you go to any of our convenience stores in Chittenden County, really open your eyes and look around and look at the flavors. I know that even NPR did a story a few days ago about now they're trying to recognize and tackle that gummy bear flavor and cotton candy flavor isn't something adults are buying. Who is buying that? Who is that targeting at the very least? A lot of the alcohol products are very, very much keyed towards the younger generations with the colors, the flavors. We know that when Alco Pops, and you're smarter about this than I am, but Alco Pops first came out, alcohol pops. Kate, can you explain what Alco Pops are?
Basically like alcohol that's like, looks like soda. Pop.
Ask Google. And when those first came out, we heard stories of people in convenience stores who accidentally sold those because they were tricking the folks who were working there. You know, they would look at them and think, that's a soda. I'm not even going to think about that. And people, younger people who worked in stores who got in trouble because they didn't realize they were selling alcohol to kids. That's when they first came out. I remember those stories. But the point is, all this marketing is going towards our kids to make them unhealthy and addicted, and it sucks, and I hate it. And that's why one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this work. Is so we can work as Kate's doing in the schools, and it's being done here in these schools, to not tell kids what's bad and wrong, because does that ever work? Doesn't that work in reverse? I know when I was a kid, Eric.
Also, because we have just a couple of minutes
Okay.
left,
Yeah,
I
sorry.
wanted to ask you to share with us about the Dover Youth to Youth
Okay.
program that you've educated our roundtables about, because we're looking to empower all of our members with this knowledge.
I'll try to say 2 sentences, and then Kate, if you'd answer that, you'll answer it better. It's a great program that, as I was just saying, empowers kids with information and tools to talk articulately about how they're marketed to versus telling them, it will hurt you, and they'll go, oh, I'm going to go try it.
One thing, yeah, it's a group of kids. They're in Dover, New Hampshire, so it's like 70 kids, I think, participate in that school. So they do prevention like a varsity sport. And when you go there, when I walked in, I said, I almost want to move here so my son can do this program, because it's like a vaccination against drug use, because it makes the kids, they're in the driver's seat, I think. So they're looking at a critical eye at the messages coming at them instead of trying to fit in. And so they do a bunch of different presentations. One's called, I think it's like 10 Lies the Tobacco Company Told, and they give that to communities. They also speak regularly at public meetings, and then they are so empowered, they identify issues in their community, and then they bring them up on their own. Like they'll say, you know, why is there this giant Marlboro sign on the street on my way to school? And they'll take that to their city leaders. So, yeah, I hope that gives like a picture of it.
Yes, I see.
Is e-smoking become vaping?
Has e-smoking become vaping? I'm going to say that, I would say there are electronic cigarettes that create a smoldering of the liquid versus vapor, and the term vapor is so misleading, as I said earlier. They can be more concentrated with the nicotine, like with juuling, but the deception is vapor sounds like water vapor. That's so harmless, when really it's like taking a Febreze canister and inhaling it. You know, it's an aerosol, if that's helpful.
It's a good one. Addictions are still paramount.
What do you think, Kate? Are both of those addictions parallel? I'm feeling like vaping.
Aerosol and vape, or like traditional.
I know e-cigarettes versus vaping that you're describing.
Oh, yeah, I think it's the same thing. Yeah. Yep.
Any other questions? I know. Yes.
Are there any statistics of use by adults in the family to more likely use teenagers?
I couldn't cite them, but I know that there is. Seeing a parent use, being around a substance certainly increases. Just like Kate said, seeing people in public can increase that.
Now it's 8:30, I want to respect everyone's time, but also if you would like to stay 5 minutes and ask questions, would you guys be okay with that?
Happy to.
Do you want to stay or do you want to close? Any other questions on people's minds?
I don't know the answer to this, but how do you guys feel about the legalization of recreational marijuana?
I was almost passionate and I paused. Why do we need one more drug to have our kids get addicted to? That's my question. There's a lot of misinformation out there right now, and there's a lot of people who are really passionate and feel like it's our right to get high. I'm not going to take all of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a,
That's a great answer, by the
yeah.
way. We had no idea how you feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, we took a stance against it formally, so we said that we don't think this is good for kids. I think the worst part of it is the promotion of it. So if we can do something about the advertising, because I guess this is like Tony and I were talking about, if we wanted to leave you with one fact, it's that brains don't finish developing until between 25 and 27, and 99% of addictions start before age 21. On the flip side of that, like over 80% of the profits from the alcohol industry come from people who have an issue with alcohol. Obviously, 100% profits from tobacco come from addiction. So you can see that we're at cross purposes a lot of times, and that's, I think, the most important thing in terms of keeping our kids safe. If we can not, allow them to be exposed till later on. So, and I think starting in the 70s, it was like, that's a DuPont slide, maybe like 99. Most kids were using some kind of drug, and after 30 years of prevention work, which has not been perfect and has had its flaws, obviously, but you have 30% of kids who never use drugs or alcohol. So it does work, and I find that inspiring and keeps me going because it's not an easy thing.
Can I interject one thing? The marijuana thing, because I'm very passionate about that. And I think it's very interesting when you draw a parallel between tobacco companies that are trying to make money on their products. And you hear politicians say, we're going to legalize marijuana to make money. That is so distasteful. It just makes my skin crawl. Our kids' lives are on the line. And we're talking about money.
What George said, yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Yeah, does the 21 thing for alcohol, is that really helping? I mean, a lot of people say, I basically at the point now where we know the high schoolers and college kids are binge drinking because of it. And a bunch of us grew up where 18 is okay, you can buy it anywhere, and we know alcohol kills people, we know all the bad things it does.
Yeah.
But is the 21 thing helping us at all?
It
The
does.
alcohol?
It does help a lot, and there's a lot of myths. I mean, I heard them when I was in college that Europeans learn how to drink responsibly, and then if you look at the rates of alcohol, like cirrhosis of the liver is one of them, and like other indicators, Europe has way worse problems with underage drinking and binge drinking than the United States does. So.
And the United States does a good job of suppressing information. Look up the World Health Organization of breast cancer and realize that it's a contributing factor to breast cancer. How often do you hear that in our country? Our country is one of the few countries that does pink washing, the opposite, where alcohol companies are raising money for breast cancer when they're causing breast cancer.
Right, it's a class 1 carcinogen, just like tobacco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
21 is still worth keeping it in place.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
Yep.
It's the marketing too. They have millions and millions of dollars to market, and they do a really good job. They're brainwashing us. Alcohol is great for you. It's wonderful. If you have a problem, it's your fault. No, it's not. It's an addiction.
It's like a sale of instant gratification. I mean, everybody knows that has had a drink, a nice glass of scotch, is what started this conversation when we were at that train.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Nice glass of scotch is
Oh,
what
good.
started this conversation, okay? Everybody understands that, you know what, you just want a moment of relaxation, you want a nice glass of scotch. I gotta tell you, it's a beautiful thing.
Easy.
However,
Easy.
yeah, right, and that's exactly the right answer. Hey, whoa, wait a minute.
Why can't we teach our kids real ways
There's
to
going to be an
relax?
intervention at that table.
Right. That's exactly right, because it's not okay.
Use aftershave
It's not
lotion.
okay. We desensitize ourselves and our kids by saying, I'm nice glass of scotch.
I was-
It's a beautiful thing.
I was
You're
given
okay.
alcohol at 14 and 15 by uncles and encouraged to drink and learn how to drink responsibly, which is an alcohol company's slogan that we seem to have embraced as though it's something smart when it isn't. I was given that. My brain was rewired, and I began to lean on alcohol in my early 20s for anxiety relief, to relax, because no one had taught me that, oh, you can do that without a substance. Actually, you can do that better. And I developed an alcohol problem, and it got me into researching, like, well, what is it? How does that work with people? So yeah, let's teach our kids how to, like, relax normally, exercise, meditate, talk to people. There's things that we do naturally that are a lot more helpful than putting carcinogen into our system.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much for the information. Thank you, Kate, for
having
coming. Thank you, Tony. And I'll wrap up by saying that there's plenty more of information and efforts going on in our communities that we don't even know about. And we'll bring more of that to the forefront. Thank you very much. Have a great week.